I am Lee Branscombe. Welcome to the first ever Hoops Prospect Group Mock Draft. I am joined by 5 contributors and friends of the site: Dustin Barnes, TJ Brown, Rich Harris, Coleman Klein, and Riley Millette. Each of us will be representing several teams in this mock draft, and each of us starts with 10 picks. Trades are permissible. Dustin will be representing the Atlanta Hawks, Detroit Pistons, New Orleans Pelicans, Miami Heat, and Oklahoma City Thunder. TJ will be representing the Minnesota Timberwolves, New York Knicks, Brooklyn Nets, Memphis Grizzlies, and Los Angeles Clippers. Rich will be representing the Chicago Bulls, Phoenix Suns, Philadelphia 76ers, Milwaukee Bucks, and Los Angeles Lakers. And the Houston Rockets, who currently have no picks. Coleman and Clayton Conover, who is not present with us today, are representing the Golden State Warriors, Portland Trailblazers, Dallas Mavericks, Denver Nuggets, and Toronto Raptors. Riley is representing the Cleveland Cavaliers, Sacramento Kings, Boston Celtics, and Indiana Pacers. I will be representing the Charlotte Hornets, Washington Wizards, San Antonio Spurs, Orlando Magic, and Utah Jazz. TJ will also be maintaining the mock draft board as picks and trades are made, and he will give us occasional updates on best available players, which will include collective rankings that we recently compiled from various draft sites, including Hoops Prospects. It is time to begin. The Minnesota Timberwolves are on the clock with the first overall pick in the 2020 draft that is being made by TJ Brown.
Thank you, Lee. And with that pick, I have the Timberwolves choosing Anthony Edwards. I thought long and hard about trading this pick because why not try to get lower so we can get a tighter fit or get a player that's a much more of a tighter fit with the talents of Karl Towns and D'Angelo Russell. But granted, the draft is about talent. So I would rather choose the talented player that may not be the best fit, but he may be better down the long run. So I have Anthony Edwards with the first pick.
Anybody have any burning comments about Anthony Edwards going number 1 in Minnesota?
No, it's pretty much what I expected.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, personally, I would have him number 1 on my draft board. Obviously, there are still some deficiencies in his game, but who at the top of this draft board doesn't have some sort of flaw? So I like the pick. I was kind of selfishly hoping he might fall a little bit. That's not to be.
I expected the pick. It wasn't because I like the pick. I'm not a big fan of Edwards. I have him 3rd on our draft board, so I mean that's not horrible, but I just feel that it's going to, in a way, and I'm not saying in style play or in body type or anything, but he kind of gives me the same feeling Cam Reddish gave me last year. I'm actually going to be shocked if he turns out to be a superstar.
And I was going to comment on that too. It kind of depends on the role they see him as. Like if they come in and thinking he's a franchise player, then I think they're going to be very upset. But he could be complementary to Karl Anthony Towns and D'Angelo Russell and some of the other role players they have.
Minnesota Timberwolves take Anthony Edwards with the first overall pick. Moving on to the second pick, we have a trade to announce. Golden State Warriors are sending this pick, number 2. They are also sending Andrew Wiggins, Kevon Looney, and Alan Samuelich to the Bulls for pick 4, Zach LaVine, Wendell Carter, and Thomas Satoransky. We obviously have some movement early in this draft and some pretty significant movement with Golden State and Chicago Bulls both swapping pretty significant pieces. So with that being said, we now have the Chicago Bulls at selection number 2 via the Golden State Warriors, and let's go ahead and make that pick.
The reason that I wanted to make this deal for Chicago was so that I could get LaMelo Ball, and so that would be our selection. And my thinking there is Chicago was dreadful offensively this year. They really don't have a true star-type point guard. Cody White is really a 2 guard, and LaVine obviously is a gunner. And he hasn't been too happy there. So that's one of the reasons why he's included in this trade. Also, Wiggins may never live up to his potential, but Chicago's needed a small forward for quite some time. And so they get that situation resolved, and they'll be rid of Otto Porter's contract next year. So I think playmaking is something that the Bulls really need, a playmaker, and I don't think there is a better playmaker in this draft. I also feel that Ball is the safest pick in this draft.
I think an underrated part of that trade is also Kevon Looney, who's obviously been hurt recently, but is a plus defender and can probably complement Marketing in a decent way. I mean, obviously Looney's not a star by any means, but just from a roster fit perspective, I'll also say on LaMelo, I think you summed that up really well. I think a lot of people have their concerns about LaMelo. I'm certainly one of those people, but I also understand that you're drafting LaMelo for the archetype that he could be at his highest level, which is like an on-the-ball playmaking engine that you can put it in his hands and just run pick and rolls and run ISOs, and he can play make for himself and others. Will he become that? I'm not certain of that, but it is what he could be, and every team is looking for that right now.
Hello, he has the passing gift. It's that simple. And someone that has the passing gift naturally is going to elevate a team. So in terms of if he doesn't even live up to the star potential or all-star potential that he may have at his height, at least he'll elevate a team by being a better Sean Livingston type. You see what I'm saying? Like, that's kind of my floor for him, a better passing Sean Livingston.
I've got my hometown Charlotte Hornets at number 3. We got a little bit of luck finally in the lottery and moved up in a draft that is known to be not very top heavy. So I guess that one cuts a little bit both ways. I'm gonna make this pick with Onyeka Okongwu from Southern Cal. Obviously the Hornets have a couple desperate needs, I guess you could say. One of those is certainly rim protection. The Hornets were a well below average defensive team last year, and all those, the young players will be a year older and hopefully a year better. Devontae Graham, Miles Bridges, and PJ Washington. There's no real rim protection on that team. There's no real there's not a ton of defensive versatility on that team. So I think Okongwu gives you right off the bat. He gives you, even though he's young, he will be, I think, a plus defender in the league. He will give you some semblance of rim protection. He'll give you some semblance of pick and roll resistance. He'll give you a little bit of switchability, although, I don't think he's going to be out there sliding his feet with elite guards or anything. Don't get me wrong. But he complements PJ Washington well, who can stretch the floor a little bit. Okongwu also played with another 7-footer at Southern Cal last year, so he was kind of forced to basically be another center on the floor. Their spacing was really jacked up at times. They didn't have terrific guards to get him the ball in great spots. I think he shows a little bit more skill and even potentially like mid-range jumper at the NBA level. So I would absolutely consider James Wiseman in this spot. But I just think Okongwu is a little bit more of a known commodity, obviously, than Wiseman is at this point, and the Hornets just need to continue to add solid young assets to this young roster. So that's what I'm going to do.
Like most people, I assume that Wiseman was the best big man coming into this draft. But after watching at least 6 games of Okongwu, like full games, seeing how he handles different matchups, like Isaiah Stewart for sure, I was convinced that he was, at least in terms of certainty, my preferred big man. I think you have to give him even a little bit more credit than you did in terms of his switchability. Not saying that he's a Bam Adebayo, like the comparison that's being thrown out in terms of his full ceiling, but he has some lateral quickness. He has some good feel and instincts for trying to guard and keep and stay in front of a guard. And if he's showing that already after his freshman year, I would hope that he can even evolve and improve his switchability and maybe be more of a stronger perimeter defender when necessary.
I think Wiseman has more upside as an offensive player, and I think Okongwu has more upside as a all-around defender. personally, I would have taken Wiseman.
If something were to come up as a deal to move down and take him, like what do you think his range would be, like draftable range?
I mean, I think in a perfect world, like the Hornets would like to move down, even though, like I said, it is the first lottery left we've had in decades. In a perfect world, I think they would do that. I just don't, with their young roster and the pieces they have, I don't think that's necessarily a reality. From a range standpoint, I mean, I wouldn't expect him to drop out of the lottery, certainly. Maybe the back half of the top 10 potentially. We are going to move forward to pick number 4, which is now the Golden State Warriors after the trade that we announced on the number 2 pick. So this will be Coleman.
I'm going to go with Okoro. Because we got Levine, I feel a little bit more comfortable sacrificing on shooting. Levine's a 40% three-point shooter. And Okoro's just that alpha dog defender, number 1 kind of cornerback style. I think Iguodala is a really good comparison for him, and he was so key to the Warriors with and without KD, being able to defend anybody. And then he also has that excellent passing ability on offense.
I think Okoro has one of the bigger upsides in this draft. His productivity wasn't, it wasn't fantastic this year, but he definitely, from the eye test, he's impressive. And I don't think his shot's broken, so I'm not really concerned about that at all. And the fact that you got Carter in that trade, also, you're not, the cupboard's not bare in terms of a 5. So, yeah, I think this pick makes sense.
The Golden State Warriors select Isaac Okoro, a freshman from Auburn. And now we are going to move along to number 5. The Cleveland Cavaliers are on the clock, and Riley will be making that pick.
All right, I hate to spoil the fun here, but we won't have to wait very long to see where Wiseman falls.
There we go.
I was holding my tongue during the Okongwu discussion about seeing how far he's going to fall because I was perfectly planning on taking him, but James Wiseman is certainly a pretty good consolation. I said about the Cavs, they're a team that needs help doing just about everything, so why not take a guy who can do just about everything? He's a great shooter, he's a roller, he's a cutter, he's a defender, he's a rebounder, and that's something that's perfectly right up the alley of the Cavs, even with Andre Drummond at the center, who even knows how long he'll stick around. He can slot in at the 4 perfectly, and I think they'll be a good complement. The only knock I really have on him is that he's not the best playmaker. He's not really going to set up Colin Sexton and Darius Garland as good as other guys in this draft could, but beggars can't be choosers, and we'll take the best available talent, and that's James Wiseman.
I don't know if Drummond and Wiseman is going to be a good combination on the floor. Though Drummond does have a player option, but it's pretty hefty, so I doubt he's going to turn that down.
I think we can break that news right now that Drummond's going to opt into $28 million.
Yeah.
I don't think he'll be there long term, though.
Right. It's probably just for 1 year, though.
Yeah, right. And that's the thing. It's only for 1 year.
Although it may be crowded initially, I don't think that's a huge deal long term.
There you go. I mean, they wouldn't have to bring Thompson back either unless it was really affordable.
Correct. We did not have to wait long to see where Wiseman would go. He goes number 5 to the Cleveland Cavaliers. And moving along here at number 6, we've got the Atlanta Hawks, and Dustin will be making that pick.
I'm actually a little surprised. I had my sights set on a specific guy, but because of a little bit of a shakeup in the top 5, I kind of had to change course a little bit. But I'm going with Deni Avdija out of Israel. I've had him anywhere from 1 to 2 on my big board, and just of his improvements that he's made, his overall tenacity, what he brings to the table. And I think in Atlanta especially, it adds another piece to it. Atlanta needs talent, and I think they're another superstar player away from being really, really good. And not to say that Deni brings that, but he adds talent and also another asset that they could use to move him as well as other players that they have for a bigger player.
I think this is the pick. That's the pick I would have made. Who'd you have your eye on, Okoro?
Vassell. Vassell was the other guy I was considering.
Ah, okay.
On talent alone, though, same reason to pick Avi as well as trade bait and to package.
Right. Yeah, I definitely like this pick. He's a very versatile player. Could play the 4, could play the 3. The Hawks really don't have any depth at either of those spots. So I think unless you want to use Reddish as the 3. Yeah, I think this is a great pick.
He's got his flaws. I mean, I don't think he's a great ball handler. I don't think he's a terrific playmaker. But despite those flaws, there's a lot to like here, and there's a lot to like about the fit too. I think with the Hawks.
Anybody who says that European ball isn't physical isn't watching. I think it's more physical than the NBA for sure, and it's definitely more physical than college basketball. So yeah.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you look at international players that come over, especially from EuroLeague and things. They get called the ticky-tack fouls in the NBA because they're able to get away with it in the EuroLeague.
Exactly.
It's so much more physical.
Yeah.
So then he goes off the board at 6 to the Atlanta Hawks, and we are moving on to pick number 7. This is going to be made by the Detroit Pistons, and we will move forward.
I think Killian Hayes is a good fit for this team because he can come in and play right away. He can play both guard positions. And also Sekou Doumbouya is also there, so you kind of have that French connection that they can feed off each other, even though Killian is from the United States. But I think that's a good couple pieces moving forward.
This is the pick I would have made. Detroit definitely can use a franchise point guard. Hayes is a solid defender. He's an excellent playmaker. Offensively, he's got a ways to go. Not a knockdown shooter yet, but he's good. He's good at shot creation. He's not the best athlete. Like, for example, I think Ball is a better athlete. That's one of the reasons why I like Ball better. But there's a lot of similarities. But I think Hayes is a superior defender. This is definitely the logical pick. It not only fills the need, he's the best player available in my mind.
Killian Hayes, who, like Dustin mentioned, is an American-born, but spent many of his formidable years growing up and playing in France. So Killian Hayes goes off the board at number 7 to the Detroit Pistons, who, as was just spoke about, kind of desperately need that lead guard playmaker archetype. And now we move on to TJ at number 8, picking for the New York Knicks.
My heart's broken. Killian Hayes was my top player for the Knicks because the Knicks would need a playmaker, a shot creator, an on-ball player pretty much. I'm still going to look at a playmaker for the Knicks, and this might be the most controversial pick, possibly even more controversial than James Wiseman falling. But I have Kyra Lewis, Alabama's Kyra Lewis,
nice.
rising a lot higher than most people would expect.
Wow.
And I'm a Knicks fan. I should have said that earlier. I'm a Knicks fan, so this is I thought about this long and hard. I thought should we trade up just to guarantee either having LaMelo or Killian? Is this too insane? Should I just go safer and get the Tyrese Halliburton type or the Obi Toppin type, which a lot of people would more likely assume would be picked at number 8? But my logic behind Kyra Lewis is I think he's underrated. Very simple. He's a solid shooter. He's even though his body type wouldn't be that of a good defender, from what I've seen, he has a knack for getting steals. He's competitive. So I think if he does get that strength, then I think he could potentially be a plus defender.
Kyra Lewis is a guy, maybe the guy that has my opinion has been elevated the most since really diving into this prospect class. You mentioned his speed. I think it's potentially the most unique individual skill in the draft. I mean, maybe you would say Aaron Nesmith as a 3-point shooter. Maybe you would say Okoro as a perimeter defender. Or maybe you would say LaMelo as like a visionary passer. But for me, I mean, he makes solid athletes and decent defenders look like they're standing still at times when he blows by them. And it really does, like you kind of alluded to the fact that it pops off the screen. I don't think he's not necessarily the vertical explosive athlete that Fox is, but in the open floor from like a dynamic speed perspective, I think that's a pretty decent comparison. I actually love this pick, even though it is a little potentially controversial, like you said.
Yeah.
I love it. I don't know how the New York Knicks fans would react if we were having a live draft in person, but I like it.
He's number 10 on our draft board, so it's not a huge jump up. And if you prefer that speed over Halliburton's more deliberate and probably a better all-around contributor, doesn't turn the ball over, better catch and shoot guy, bigger. There's a lot of things to like about Halliburton, but Lewis is definitely more athletic. I think he's like, minimum you're going to get out of Lewis is like a Dennis Schroeder-like guy. So yeah, it's a good pick. To me, it's not that controversial. Halliburton's 6 on our draft board, Lewis 10, and yeah, this is right there. So
I mean, they have not been able to get anything going in the half court. Really, getting some easy looks would probably be super beneficial for them, for RJ. And there's nobody better at starting fast break than Kira Lewis.
A couple of you guys brought up Tyrese Halliburton and why he's more seen as a better all-around prospect. The reason why I chose to pass on him, not to get too much into Halliburton until the next person picks him, is that I don't think he has the dynamic on-ball creation talent. His ball handling ability is not tight enough to run a pick and roll and to be able to carve up a defense. He's a better secondary ball handler and passer, and just all like I think he's more, if he's next to a ball dominant player, I think that's how Halliburton's talents are most utilized.
Kira Lewis Jr. goes number 8 to the New York Knicks, and I have the next pick at number 9 with the Washington Wizards, and this can probably be a little bit shorter because we already talked about this guy a bit. Tyrese Halliburton, sophomore from Iowa State. One of my favorite players in the draft. I think TJ made some really good points about Lewis's junior fit with the Knicks. I do actually agree that Halliburton, it may not be the best situation for him there due to what they have on the roster so far. I think Washington is a bit better of a fit for a player like Halliburton. My favorite thing about Tyrese Halliburton is his just like innate basketball instincts on both sides. It's almost like Spidey sense level anticipation and manipulation that TJ talked about earlier when he's pushing the ball in transition or looking off a defender as he throws the ball to the opposite corner. That's what I love most about him. I think obviously with Bradley Beal in Washington, you've got your on-ball creator. If you need Beal to do that, you can also ask Beal to play off the ball with Halliburton. If John Wall ever comes back and looks anything like his old self, I don't think that's an issue. I think you can play Halliburton with him as well because he's a good spot-up shooter. He played off the ball earlier in his career when they had Horton Tucker, like Rich alluded to last year. Halliburton also just played with like a pretty below average roster around him at Iowa State this year. When you watch his games, there are just multiple in every game there's examples of like drop passes that should be dunks or open threes that should be makes or missed layups. I mean, all that type of stuff. So I think when he's on the floor with better players, he's going to be more effective.
I really love Halliburton's game, especially when I think about players like who I'd want to play with. I mean, he's the type of guy that makes the team better. And if you look at his path that he's taken, when he was playing in FIBA, the U19, nobody knew who he was. He kind of just played. He just was the glue guy, was out there making plays. Freshman year, Iowa State, it's already been talked about, but he was kind of feeling his way. Sophomore year, he was the guy. So first year of really being the guy, and he put up great stats, got noticed, and then he got hurt. So I think if you're looking forward at his potential and his, ceiling and his floor, I think he has a long way to go. I don't think he's anywhere near where he's going to be, and there's a lot more upside. And the areas of his weakness are areas that can be improved pretty easily.
Halliburton goes off the board at 9 to the Wizards. Next up is Rich at number 10, picking for the Phoenix Suns.
If I was making this pick, I would take Vassell. Phoenix has improved, defensively, but they're still below average. Booker, they do, and that's the thing. I mean, they have Booker, Cam Johnson, Miles Bridges, or not Miles Bridges, Mikal Bridges, and even Oubre could play the wing, but they use him usually at the 4. But so they have a lot of those types of guys. But in the bubble, they were using like Cam Johnson as a 4. So if they continue going with that small ball lineup, then Vassell could, he could be playing behind Booker and Bridges. And to me, he's one of the guys in this draft. It's really hard to find holes in his game. Yeah, he's a little bit on the slender side, but who cares? He can get bigger. He's athletic. He can do a little bit of everything. I like his athleticism. I like his effort. I like his overall productiveness. One thing I'd like to see him, maybe tighten his handle a little bit and attack the rim more. But you can see that about a lot of guys in this draft. You could say that about a lot of guys in the NBA, and Charles and Shaq do every night. So, that would be my pick.
You can never have too many Vassells.
Right.
Right. That player, it just fits so well with everything. And I think he's kind of underrated as a shot creator. He doesn't have a ton of burst or shake, but if the defense is scrambling, he's really got that 1 or 2 dribble, beat the defender closing out, and then hitting the pull-up. He did that a lot. It was really and
he had a great assist turnover ratio,
Yeah.
There's another thing. He doesn't foul. He doesn't commit turnovers. It's just like, it's really hard to poke holes in the guy's game.
Yeah. Between him and the Suns already have Mikal Bridges, that's just you never have too many of those kinds of guys.
Right.
Devin Vassell, the sophomore from Florida State, goes 10th to the Phoenix Suns. And we are going to take a very quick break. After every 10 picks or so, we're going to try and give you guys a quick update on the mock draft so you can see who has been selected, and also so you can see who the best available players are in our consensus draft ranking as well.
So these are the picks that have been made, 1 through 10. And the best player available based off Hoops Prospects list is Obi Toppin, who we have ranked 7th. We also have Patrick Williams, 11th, and Aaron Nesmith, 12th. So those are the top 3 best players available.
Those rankings there are based on the collective rankings that I took from 7 different websites very recently, just a few days ago. And our rankings are included, but people like Toppin a lot better than I do.
We're going to move into the 11th pick, which is going to be made by me for the San Antonio Spurs, whose 100-year playoff appearance streak was ended this past summer. So they have a lottery pick for the first time since like the 50s, I think. And with this pick, I am going to be selecting Patrick Williams from Florida State. So 2 Seminoles two Seminoles back-to-back being selected. Patrick Williams is a freshman, actually from Charlotte, North Carolina, and had a pretty terrific season for Leonard Hamilton in Tallahassee. Not eye-popping from like a raw statistical standpoint, but when you watch him on film and when you dig into his advanced statistics a little bit more, he's a pretty impressive player. I actually think he has a little bit. I think he's got more star upside than the consensus is giving him credit for right now. He obviously, he shot low 30s from 3, so that's certainly reason for concern. But when you look at his free throw numbers, he's in the mid 80s. When you look at his shooting off the dribble, he's well above average. He shows flashes of playmaking, creation on the ball at 6'9". I think he's another example of a switchy, versatile 3-4 that can guard multiple positions. He can be pretty electric in transition. He's an above the rim player.
I don't disagree too much, but the thing about Williams is, by the way, 7'2" wingspan. That's lovely,
Yeah.
and he might even be able to defend fives. I like his defense. I like his defensive upside. On offense, I don't quite get what people like about him so much, except for the fact that he's one of the youngest prospects in this draft. But I just don't see the functional athleticism for him when he has the ball in his hands.
So Patrick Williams goes off the board to the Spurs, so both the Florida State guys are selected. Number 12, we're moving along, the Sacramento Kings, and this is Riley's pick.
Lee's really in the mood to steal my picks today, so I'm kind of rolling with the punches. I was going to take Patrick Williams, but we're going to move on to pretty much the next best thing, which is Aaron Nesmith. He could provide some really solid depth at the 2, especially since that's a crazy muddy situation between Buddy Hield maybe on the move and Bogdan Bogdanovic potential contract extension. So assuming that you can't sign both of those guys to long-term extensions, which you can't, it'll help to have some clarity back there. And Aaron Nesmith is a guy who can pretty much inject some three-point shooting right into your lineup as soon as he steps on the court. Probably one of the best three-point shooters in the draft. And he's not the best playmaker. That's one of the bigger knocks on him, but he's a wing. De'Aaron Fox is your playmaker. He's a great player in my opinion. He's one of my favorite in the game. He's like you mentioned that Tyler Lewis comparison before, but he's fast, he's a puncher, and he's a playmaker. And when you have a guy like Aaron Nesmith that can stay open and a guy like Marvin Bagley in the post, you kind of have each three like a three-headed horse, one guy doing each thing.
Yeah, and Nesmith can also back up Barnes too, because he's got a good size for a wing.
Right.
The thing about the money, I mean, Hield, they're already committed to Hield long term financially, but the problem is he makes like 25 million next year, but Barnes, they have a huge chunk of money committed to him, and somewhere along the line they're going to have to pay De'Aaron Fox. And then, if they pay Bogdanovic, which we're probably, I don't know what you guys think, but what are we thinking there? Like 15 mil, maybe more?
Yeah, depending on what the cap does after this year.
Yeah, well, I can't see the cap going up.
No, it's going to go down for sure.
Yeah. So, and if that happens, there's going to be hardly anybody that's not going to be over. But I guess it depends on how much they want to be over. But yeah, definitely Nesmith is definitely one of the best shooters in this draft. You got to like his physical build, and yeah, it's a good pick.
Yeah, anytime you can get De'Aaron Fox another plus shooter, I think that's a good thing. And like we don't need to rehash it, but I think you made a good point. It gives them some insurance of sorts if if Buddy Hield's unhappy and want to ask out, or if they do not bring back Bogdanovic, they've got hopefully what they would hope is their future two guard. So number 13, we have got Dustin picking for the New Orleans Pelicans.
New Orleans had somewhat of a pretty bad showing in the bubble. As far as advancing, and there's a lot of hype behind them as the year started. And personally watching them play, I saw a lot of lack of creation on offense and getting the defense to collapse and looking for open players. And one guy that really comes to mind in this draft that could fit there, and this is probably a reach for some, is Grant Riller, the senior out of Charleston. I think he's very underrated. I don't think that seniors or even mid-major or low-major prospects should be looked at not very valuable, especially like if you compare those international prospects as well. You look at recent success from Damian Lillard, Joel Morant, CJ McCollum, and he did a lot of really good things at College of Charleston, and I think he'll do great things in New Orleans.
I think Riller brings out a lot of varied opinions, and I'm kind of on the other side of the spectrum than Dustin on Riller. And when I look at him, there's no doubting his productivity. And it was overall productivity. The problem I see at the NBA is I don't think his assist numbers, his ATO ratio are not, ideal. And he played at Charleston. He didn't play a good schedule. And I'm just worried, what's he going to do with the NBA? He's not going to be able to dominate the ball at Charleston. And he's not a good shooter. So, his main thing is creating and by having the ball in his hands all the time. And I just don't see that happening at the NBA. So,
Yeah, I think that's fair.
there's a wide variety. Some people love the guy and they think, he's a top 20 player. And I just not in that group.
Yeah, I hear you, Rich, for sure. And I probably would have him maybe later first round, early second round, personally. But I love his first step. His first step is really dynamic, and he gets to the hoop. And I love his creativity when trying to score. Granted, he's not going to be a star player in the NBA, but I enjoy watching players that have that lightning quick first step.
I just don't know the athleticism that you're seeing. I think when you put him on an NBA floor, I don't know if you're going to be so impressed, when he's not playing against Delaware or Navy.
I think he recognizes that. I don't think he thinks he's, lightning quick or, the fastest player on the floor all the time. He does a really good job of positioning his body and his hips on the defender. So the defender is either on his back or he reads the defenders really, really well. So I think that's kind of the IQ in his game. Right. And that may take some time, and I think it definitely will take some time to really translate in the NBA. And when he gets into that development staff with a team. But I think if you look at down the line of NBA players and NBA teams, it's not always the most athletic or the highest jumping vertical guys that make it in the league. It's always a mix. So, and that's why I kind of like him at New Orleans.
Certainly an interesting selection. And you know what, though, when you like a guy, sometimes you got to go get him. And there have been some pretty good examples lately of year guys succeeding in the NBA, maybe more than the consensus might think. So we'll see how that one checks out. Moving on, we are going to number 14. This is the Boston Celtics, and Riley is making this pick.
I'm not going to lie, it's really tempting seeing Obi Toppin on the board so late, but I'm going to go with my gut, and I'm going to take Precious Achiuwa. Rebounding is something that I think the Celtics can improve upon, and he was one of the better rebounders in college this year. He has good offensive potential, which is something that the Celtics lacked in a true power forward before Jason Tatum started getting minutes there. He can give him a little scoring boost off the bench, which is another thing that they really could use. And he gives them some relief in defense. He was a really great defender. And Daniel Tice is really the guy that's going to really give you that push on defense. He doesn't, I think, have that factor. And I think Achiuwa does. He brings a lot of great energy on both ends of the floor, but especially on defense.
Worst case scenario with Achiuwa is he's going to be a good defender and maybe he's not so great on offense. Right. But Boston, Boston's already doing very well with those types of players playing at the 5 spot. So I definitely think he could be a small ball 5 with that wingspan he has. I think this is a good pick. I would definitely take Achiuwa before Toppin.
Number 15, I've got the Orlando Magic. This is certainly an interesting pick. Obviously, the Magic got tough news that Jonathan Isaac, who was injured in the bubble, will be out for what looks like the entirety of next season. So Isaac was really beginning to pop as a special defensive player and really a special all-around player. So, they'll be reeling off that, but they still have a young, interesting roster. They've made the playoffs the last 2 years, obviously. So for me here, I'm going to actually go with Saddiq Bey, sophomore from Villanova. He's a player that, my opinion, another guy who's my opinion has heightened on as I've, watched the film and kind of covered this draft class. I think the Magic certainly can use some shooting. Saddiq Bey was an elite catch and shoot shooter this year for Villanova. Not sure that Evan Fournier will be back with Orlando, and he was really one of their main knockdown shooter guys. So I think Sadiq Bey, frankly, I think he steps in the NBA as at the very least, a rotational piece immediately. Most underrated things about him that people don't realize is, he was Villanova's. He was Jay Wright's go-to guy for opposing stars, whether that was a forward on the other team that was terrific, or that was a guard. I mean, he guarded Devon Dotson, he guarded Miles Powell. He guarded
Marcus Howard.
I mean, every time they had a scoring guard, Bey would get that assignment. So I don't think people realize how, his lateral movements average, I think, but he's just an intelligent defender. He's big, and he knows how to use his body to get in the way of guys and make them at the very least take and make tough shots over him, which isn't easy to do. He's
a perfect fit for Orlando, who not only struggled to make threes, but they struggled to stop people from making threes. So he's a great fit for Orlando. Good pick.
At 16, Coleman is making the pick for the Portland Trailblazers, who won the race for 8th in the bubble and got eliminated by the Lakers. So what do you got for us, Coleman?
I'm really tempted. I see Poku is still available.
Ooh.
I was not expecting him to still be available at this point. I can't do it. I think the Lakers really need players that are ready now because Dame and CJ are already getting up there in age. I don't want to push that back anymore. So I'm actually going to go with Josh Green. Their wing rotation is really short. They need a lot of help there. Who knows if Melo's going to be back next year? I know Ronnie Hood's coming back from injury, but some good defenders can always help if your backcourt is really small and just in general not good defensively. And Josh Green, probably the best perimeter defender still left, I think. And then also he can hit open shots. If he's just hanging out in the corner and teams try to double Dame like they usually do, I think he can be kind of like Melo, the way Melo just stood in and hit those shots. I think Josh Green can do that as well, and then finish at the basket. So I like the fit there, even though maybe he's not the best player available.
I agree. Good fit, but not the best player available. But for what Portland needs, especially I don't know if they're going to want Ariza back, and if they don't, they can get rid of him because his contract's not guaranteed. As you said, Hood's injury prone, and he has a player option, and it's only like $6 million or something. So he can turn that. I could easily see him turning that down. So good pick.
Pick number 17 that TJ is making for the Minnesota Timberwolves. Obviously, this will be his second pick for the Timberwolves, and he selected Anthony Edwards, number 1. So who are you adding to that core, TJ?
While listening to everyone and seeing the wings go by, I'm kind of going in and seeing who can I find. I was going to choose first, looking at Patrick Williams. Hopefully, if he fell, maybe. Then I was looking at Sadiq Bey, hoping that he fall a little bit. Then my third option was Josh Green. Funny enough, Josh Green was my third option. I can show you my paper later on. So I'm like, okay. So in terms of wings, I'm not really satisfied with the options left on the board. So I'm just gonna pick the guy that is, in my opinion, the best overall offensive player who's left, and Obi Toppin. Not expecting to have him.
Right.
And doesn't really fit he doesn't mesh. His talents don't mesh cleanly with the Timberwolves, especially with Karl Towns not being the best defender and Obi Toppin being even a worse defender, 6'9", 6'10". So I love his offensive game. He's very polished, very clean scorer. I think he's even a better shooter than he's even shown possibly at Dayton when he just gets cleaner looks and maybe when he's on a team that he's not the number 1 option, can possibly even get more catch and shoot looks and have even higher percentages. Obviously, his athleticism is off the charts. Vertical is awesome. But the defensive struggles is why he falls, I think. He doesn't really he has stiff hips. He doesn't really move quickly laterally in pick and rolls. He's going to get demolished. So that's going to be his biggest issue or his biggest challenge, unless he somehow finds a way to improve his lateral athleticism and loosens up his hips as in like over time.
It's going to be tough to build a good defense with D'Lo, Cat, Edwards, and Toppin. But man, the offense got some punch.
Yeah, for sure. This is not going to get us W's in 2021. The next season is not going to get us
I have
W's.
an announcement to make. The Sixers have officially applied to move into the Timberwolves division, so they can play them 6 times a year.
Yeah, it's going to be. Go ahead, Rich.
No, there's definitely a need at power forward in Minnesota. But the defense is, you have a collection of guys. They definitely would be, electric, especially, in transition, but yeah, it's kind of a mixed bag. They need a power forward, but he doesn't really mix with the guys you want. But as you said, you could trade bait. The one thing I think people are overlooking, the people who rank Toppin as a top 10 player, some people even have him number 2. Some people have even talked about him being the first overall pick, is he's 22 plus years old. And so when you look at the flaws in his game, you're like, well, when you look at it in Patrick Williams' game, and you're like, okay, the guy's barely 19 years old. But when you look at Obi Toppin, you're thinking, oh, he's almost 23 years old. So, yeah, I think it's logical that he would fall this far.
I like TJ pointed out, he was obviously hoping to add to kind of the wing depth, and that just wasn't in the cards. I think it's smart not to reach for something you need just because you want it. And honestly, I think Toppin's really good value at 17. I'm not sure that we will actually see him fall that far on draft night. Obviously, we will see if that happens or not. Coleman is making the 18th pick for the Dallas Mavericks.
I'm actually going to go for Tyrese Maxey here, as I think he's a pretty good value at 14. He doesn't really he's 14th ranked on the big board, but he fell to 18. I don't really know that he's all that great at any one thing, but I think as a secondary playmaker, he can be good for Dallas. Dallas is one of the few teams that has a primary playmaker that's really tall, which is really good for Maxey because Maxey's kind of point guard size, but you don't really want him playing point guard on offense, which is really my biggest problem with him. But in Dallas, that's not so much an issue. Play a little bit of defense, play a little bit off ball, maybe create a shot a little bit on ball if needed. And I just think having a lot of guys like that around Doncic are going to help him.
The main thing, I think Maxey is actually an underrated defender, though he doesn't produce a lot of steals and blocks, but I still think he plays with nice intensity. He's a solid athlete. My main concern is, as you say, he has point guard size, but he doesn't have point guard ideal creativity as to be a lead guard. But I'm mainly concerned about his shooting. But yeah, at this point in the draft, I think it's a good spot.
Number 19, we've got the Brooklyn Nets selecting, and that's going to be TJ.
With the Brooklyn Nets, I'm just looking at how they're most likely not going to look to rely on a rookie if Kyrie and Kevin Durant are healthy for next year and are trying to win a championship. So why not just go for the potential home run ball, not trying to really find someone that fits super well, but he has a lot of talent, and that will be, for me, Alexei, hopefully I don't butcher the name, Alexei Pokushevsky.
You got it.
At number 19. He's a 7-footer. Okay, let me backtrack. He obviously didn't play super high-level competition in Europe, but granted, he's a 7-footer, and when you do watch his clips, although it's not the craziest competition, he looks smooth. For someone that tall and that skinny, he has a lot of fluidity with the ball in his hands, along with a little bit of the passing gift, just being able to fool defenders and just find the open man. That's not really expected of a 7-footer, but he just has that natural talent, which I appreciate for sure. Also has a little bit of shooting talent as well. And this may be a long shot, and I'm not sure this will be perfectly lined up. But Kevin Durant, who's also a 7-footer, 6'11" player, maybe he takes him under his wing. Maybe possibly gives him a few pointers. Not really going to have the evidence to point to Durant being a mentor. At least I don't have that handy knowledge at this point. but possibly that could be something that could help Alexei even reach his ceiling. Hopefully he gains a little weight, and maybe 2 years, maybe even 3 years down the line, he has an impact.
I think it's perfect pick for the Nets. You know, they're not going to be drafting for right away, and I think Poku, as we all call him, definitely has. I think in terms of upside, he's near the top of this class. Impressive combination of passing, shooting, dribbling for a 7-footer. So yeah, I think that's a great pick for the Nets.
I've kind of framed Poku as like, you know, he's an investment in the future. You know, he's not a guy, at least in my opinion. I think some would certainly disagree. I don't think he's ready to contribute on day one, really, no matter what roster he goes to.
Yep.
But you talk about that long-term upside, and there's plenty of that. I mean, he does some things on the floor that kind of make your jaw drop at times. Number 20, we've got the Miami Heat and Dustin.
I just want to say Eric Spoelstra is very upset that he can't have Bam Adebayo and Poku playing together for the future, because just the idea of those two and their passing and their abilities would be amazing.
Yeah,
That's a visual for sure.
So, yeah. But I'm going with Cole Anthony. I think he is a good value pick here. And he kind of got a bad rap being at North Carolina. And I think under Spoelstra and their development staff, you'll see the Oak Hill Cole Anthony.
Very athletic. Not an ideal lead guard, but he's, in terms of playmaking, he's definitely a score-first guy, but super athletic. And I think didn't play his best as Carolina, wasn't healthy all year, didn't have a great surrounding cast, but a great value pick for Miami.
He played with the worst spacing, I think, of any prospect in this draft. It was terrible. People rag on his finishing a little bit, but I saw a stat, his expected finishing, he actually outperformed that. He finished at the rim at a higher rate than what you would typically see for someone with looks that are as contested as Anthony had. So, I mean, it's hard to imagine a worse situation than what he played in this year.
All right, so we're going to move to 21, but we do have a trade to announce before we make that pick. The Philadelphia 76ers are sending pick 21, Josh Richardson and Al Horford, to the Kings for pick 35 later in this draft, Buddy Hield and Corey Joseph. So that kind of that Aaron Nesmith pick at 12 for the Kings, I think, makes even more sense now. Obviously, now that Buddy Hield is not there. The 76ers get a shooter, which they need desperately in Buddy Hield, and you kind of hope he can resurrect his former self in Philadelphia. So this is an interesting pick, and now we've got the Kings on the clock at 21.
We're going to go – now we got Al Horford at the 5, so now we're going to go Jalen Smith to put at the 4. I think he can fit really nicely into their lineup as a tall pick-and-pop / cutting guy. All defensive teamer. He can give them a really, really needed boost on defense. He's a great once again, great compliment to Marvin Bagley. He's a post scorer. Jalen Smith is a cutter. You know, he's not stepping on anyone's toes. Great player overall offensively. He can do a lot of things. He can shoot well. He can finish with both hands. And I think this is just a great fit.
So, with Horford, you get a backup for Holmes, and that contract's only for 2 years, so it's not going to kill him. And they got rid of Hield's huge contract, which was, I think, for 4 years, starting this year. I think that Smith can play the 4 and the 5. I think it's a nice – Bagley doesn't block shots. Holmes doesn't block shots, so you get – and Smith does. So, you have a rim protector. And I think Smith's perimeter defense is a little underrated too.
Done a pretty good job with this Kings roster. I mean, Fox and Jason Richardson and Barnes and Bagley and Horford and Holmes and Naismith off the bench, potentially Bogdanovich coming back, and then Jalen Smith is kind of a off the bench, longer term project prospect. So certainly some interesting things happening down there in Sacramento. Anybody else want to comment before we take a quick break to do a draft board update?
You're doing a lot better than Vlade did. I'll never forgive him for passing on Doncic.
Oh man, so funny.
Riley for GM in Sacramento. Come on,
Yeah.
start the campaign. All right, that's a great note to take a quick break and have TJ show us where we're at on the draft.
Riley just took Jalen Smith at 21. The best players available are Theo Maladon at 17, RJ Hampton at 19th, and Tyrell Terry at 21, based off our collective rankings.
So we are moving along now after our second draft board update to pick number 22, and this is the Denver Nuggets, and Coleman will be making that pick.
Alrighty. Gonna take the first guy on the composite big board who's actually a second round grade. Nuggets kind of have a lot of good but not great perimeter players. And I'm going to take another good but not great perimeter player, Desmond Bane. I've been watching TCU for years now and never really had Bane as a NBA prospect, but a lot of stuff that he does off the ball just as a elite functional shooter. He's plenty capable defensively. I think you can pretty much plug and play him anywhere. He's going to make the right reads, make the right passes. Probably not going to change the Nuggets' fortunes too much, but he's another guy like Devin Vassell. It can never hurt to have too many Desmond Banes.
Number 23, we are coming to the Utah Jazz, which is my pick. The Utah Jazz were eliminated by the Denver Nuggets in a Game 7 thriller. For me, when I watched that Utah-Denver series, I thought it was such a big deal, obviously, that the other Bogdanovich was not in the playoffs. It forced Joe Ingles into the starting lineup, which just put so much playmaking on Donovan Mitchell. They lost a lot of their bench punch. They really were only bringing Clarkson off the bench, who's very hit or miss. So I think Utah desperately needs another guy that can play make with the ball in his hands. And I'm actually going to take Theo Maladon, who is the best available player on our board right now. Does he walk into the NBA on day one as a guy that you can put the ball in the hands and contribute or depend on in a playoff series like they were just in? Maybe not. But I think as a long-term prospect playmaker, I'm very high on Maladon. He played obviously on the French national team with Killian Hayes, and there were times, in my opinion, where he was the most impressive player on the floor. He's tall, he can shoot it. He's got great length. He's got good vision. He's got good feel. He's just one of those players that he's very young, obviously. And Rich, is he a guy that comes over right away, you think?
I would think so, yeah. But you got to remember. He really kind of slipped because he didn't match his production from last year, but he was hurt, for portions of the season. Plus, his team made that jump up from Euro Cup to Euro League, which is a big jump. So, yeah, I think he's a bit underrated. I think it's a great pick for them. I do think he comes over right away.
24. So we're getting into the later stages of the first round here. Rich has got the Milwaukee Bucks.
The biggest thing they could use is a third piece beside Middleton and Giannis, but they're not going to find that here at this draft. So they have a ton of free agents coming up. I'm going to go with
Suspense.
Yeah, well, I wasn't expecting, to see some of these guys available. So but I'll tell you what, I personally don't have this guy rated as a first round pick, but just about everybody else does. And in our latest mock draft on the site, I had them taking Terry. And my reasoning was this team needs an offensive spark that somebody else. It just never seems like Connaughton's a good shooter, but he's never used. And that's what I'm saying. I wonder if it's more of a coaching thing. But Bledsoe, he doesn't really give you a lot of shooting. I don't know. I think Terry's a couple years away, but I think he's one of the better shooters in this draft. And so I think he also can play off the ball, and he's a great catch and shoot shooter. So I think that's why I'm going with him. It's kind of a long-term type pick.
You know, my big concern for Terry is his size and his defensive ability, but maybe the Bucks kind of have that covered everywhere else on their roster. So maybe if he goes in the first round, maybe this is one of the places he should go. Number 25, we've got the Oklahoma City Thunder, and we've got Dustin.
Let me just say, all these prospects that are left is kind of a mess, especially for OKC. A lot of point guards and bigs, and nobody that can really shoot. So I'm actually going to go with Jamias Ramsey out of Texas Tech, who has the ability to shoot, and he kind of fits the OKC style of athletes, just surrounding with athletes. So I like his. There are some things, obviously, he needs to work on. Some of his finishing, and, you know, as a freshman, he struggled at times, and sometimes he couldn't even be on the court. But I do like his future in the NBA, especially getting around guys that complement him.
We had really nice, three-point shooting numbers. He was over 40%. He definitely has ways to go, but again, he's one of the younger guys in this class. And physical body, you know, he's he's not exactly Lou Dort, but I mean, he's much more developed than your average prospect, especially at a young age. So I think this is a good pick. I think I think they'd be happy that he actually falls this far to them.
26, the Boston Celtics have another selection. So Riley is going to make that pick.
We're going to go RJ Hampton right here. RJ Hampton's a speedy guy. He can work the pick and roll. He can shoot pretty decent. Not that he'll really need to all that much, but he can finish really well at the rim. And the Celtics really badly need a scoring guard who can come off the bench and keep the unit moving when Kemba's resting. And I think RJ Hampton's that guy. He's also a really good playmaker, which is really, really helpful for guys who have such great off-ball skills like Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum. And that's what the Celtics are really needing right now. And as a Celtics fan, it's tough to see the second unit come out and Brad Wanamaker struggling to make it to the rim, struggling to make passes. So I think RJ Hampton can fill a really great area of need here for the Celtics. Hampton
obviously didn't shoot well in Australia, but I think athletically, his playmaking, I think, you know, as Riley said, their bench can really struggle at times. So he's definitely going to have to improve as a shooter. He's not a guy right now you can count on to come off the bench and knock it down for you, but he'll definitely be a good playmaker. And defensively, he needs to work too. But Boston's one of the better defenses in the league, so they can afford a guy like this.
And also, I can easily see him developing on the main Red Claws. I think that's their G League team. Have him be more on the ball. And then once he's a little bit ready, got the jumper straightened out a little bit probably give him a look later down the line in the season or the following season after his rookie year.
TJ, you are back up. You got your franchise point guard with Kira Lewis Jr. for the Knicks earlier in the first round, and now you have the 27th selection to continue to add to that team.
Around this area, I was looking at Grant Riller, who Dustin took a lot earlier, which is totally fine. I'm going to take Malachi Flynn. So interesting that it's not usual that you take the same position, especially in the first round. But I just think he's a baller. And even though probably he's not going to be played together with Kira Lewis, I like having at least two ball handlers I can depend on. Or at least I have the confidence in Malachi Flynn as a ball handler and a shot creator, as well as a tough defender. Like, he's not going to be the biggest and most intimidating player on the defensive side, but he's very frisky. He's very feisty, and I appreciate that level of competitiveness on the defensive side.
I have to say that I really don't like this pick at all because I wanted Malachi Flynn on the Sixers.
I was scared for a second. I'm like, oh no.
No, I actually think they should consider him at 21 if they're picking from there. Yeah, that's how much I like him. I really think he's underrated, and I would consider him for the Sixers at pick 21.
One of the better pick and roll players in this draft too, and I think you kind of hit the nail on the head, TJ. Like, yeah, is it a little unconventional to take 2 point guards in the first round? Maybe, but when you look at the situation that the Knicks are in with a lack of on the ball playmaking. I think in that situation it makes a ton of sense. Even if Kira Lewis Jr. is everything you hope he can be, you got to have somebody to organize the offense when he's off the floor. So I'm with you on that. The Toronto Raptors are on the clock at 28, and Coleman is making this pick.
This one's super easy for me. I'm taking Bolmaro. I'm not sure when he's going to be coming over, if it's going to be anytime soon, but I think he's definitely the best player available at this point. And if any team was in a position to wait on somebody coming over, I think the Raptors are in a great spot that way. Great development franchise, and I think Bolmaro's going to step in and be in a great spot. Also, Lowry and I guess Gasol's getting a little bit up there, kind of on the older side. So I kind of like Bolmaro to be part of that next generation.
He is going to stay over for at least a year. So he automatically becomes a draft and stash guy, which to me enhances his draft value for certain teams. A talented player, versatile player, can do a lot of things, could be a big point guard, he's going to have to improve as a shooter if he wants to play on the wing, but plays great defense too. It's intense defender.
Before the 29th pick is made, we have a trade to announce. The Los Angeles Lakers are sending pick 29 to the Philadelphia 76ers, and the Sixers will be compensating the Lakers with pick 34 and 36. So we basically have a pick swap here. The Sixers are going to pick at 29, and the Lakers will now gain 2 second-round picks at 34 and 36. Rich, who do you like?
I am going to go with one of Lee's favorite players. He's going to be mad at me because he probably wants him in the second round. I'm going to go with Emmanuel Quickly of Kentucky.
That's my guy.
Yep. Look at Lee's face. Look at him. He won him. Sorry, Lee.
That's all right. I'll adjust.
He's definitely, to me, one of the most underrated players in this draft. I don't understand it. I don't know how you can watch Maxey and Quickly and, have Maxey as a top 15 guy and have Quickly as a top 50 guy. I just don't see that. Good defender, unbelievable, +7 wingspan, excellent shooter. He could play the point in a pinch. Doesn't have ideal height for a wing. It's 6'3", but that +7 wingspan is going to make up for that. Also, he's a superior, at least in measurable, superior athlete to Maxey.
I'll add quickly. There we go. He's a much better perimeter defender, I think, than people realize. He kind of evolved into one of the premier wing defenders in the SEC this year, along with being obviously an elite shooter. One other quality that I love about him is he moves off the ball to hunt his shots. He doesn't just stand around. I love Quickly. Last pick of the first round at 30, the Boston Celtics making their 15th pick of the first round, and we've got Riley up.
I'm going to take pretty much the anti-RJ Hampton here, like a raw shooter, and that's going to be Nico Mannion. He was never a great shooter when he was at Arizona, or a great three-point shooter when he was at Arizona. But he's a great spot-up shooter, and he's a good catch-and shooter. I'm not fully in love with his game. He's not really what you would call a three-level scorer. But as I mentioned before, the Celtics bench really struggles to score. And with the Celtics' third pick in the first round, I think they can afford to shoot for the stars. And at Mannion's best, he could be a really great shooting specialist with a little bit of defensive upside. So I think he could be a really good rotation player for the Celtics.
I really like his playmaking, and his shot doesn't, when you watch him shoot, he has a pretty shot, so you don't quite understand why he only made 32 or 33%. But he's a heady player. He gives good effort. Athletically, it's not there. But I think if he can knock down the threes, which it seems like he should, I think he'll be a solid. I don't think some people see him as near the lottery type guy. I don't see that. But I think he definitely, solid player. And once he knocks down those threes with his playmaking ability, definitely more of an offensive player than a defensive player for sure.
That concludes the first round of the Hoops Prospect NBA mock draft. Thank you for viewing and sticking with us, and we will be back with our second round selections.
we're going to open up the second round, and we have the Mavericks lead off with pick 31.
Mavericks, I want to get the rim gravity that I did not get in the first round, so I'm going to go with Isaiah Stewart here.
Right, next up is Charlotte at pick 32, and Dustin is going to be picking for Lee.
I'm going with Xavier Tillman. I like his tenacity. He's definitely older, but I think he's a very solid big man, especially for Charlotte. Gives them that senior leadership.
Next up is the Timberwolves at 33.
So again, just trying to stockpile talent for the Minnesota Timberwolves, and a guy I think who's pretty talented is Devon Dotson. I appreciate his quickness, like I brought up with Kyra Lewis, and I think he has some potential as a backup point guard who can change the pace, pick up the pace, and be a nice transition player.
T-Wolves need a backup point guard. The Lakers picking, but I pick for them as well, and a player who I thought they might take at pick 29, now that they got 2 picks for 1, is still available, and that's Trey Jones, one of the higher floor guys in this draft. I think it's a no-brainer that he's at least going to be a solid player. I don't think he's going to be a star, but I think he's going to be a solid player, and definitely point guard is a position where the Lakers could use some youth and quality play. Pick 35. I think I'm going to take Jaden McDaniels. Don't like how things transpired for him this year. He had some off-court, on-court type of issues, but the talent's there. He was a top 10 prospect coming to Washington. Lanky, can play the 4, can play the 3. And the one thing he did do well this year was catch and shoot, and the Sixers need shooting. Next up, pick 36 would be the Lakers, so I'm going again. This has become my show. Let's see. I'm going to go with Daniel Oturu of Minnesota. I think he has first-round potential. Lakers right now, their current roster doesn't need any centers, but JaVale McGee and Dwight Howard are both potentially leave free agency, and neither of them is very young. So this would give the Lakers a nice player to groom behind them, and he has two-way potential. So not just a shot blocker. Next up is the Wizards at pick 37.
And I'm going to go with Zeke Naji. I like his defense, very young, runs the floor very well, and I like his potential in Washington to actually get a lot of minutes.
Yes, agreed. They could use some help at power forward. Next up at pick 38 is the New York Knicks.
With this pick, I might take a flyer, taking a guy that's probably going to get drafted a little bit lower in the second round and possibly even undrafted. I really love this guy's game. Sam Merrill from Utah State. Really elite shooter, also has some pick and roll potential. I like his size at 6'5". Not very old for a prospect, but I'm not really stressing over the age as much as you, Rich.
Next up is the Pelicans.
I'm going Elijah Hughes from Syracuse. Adds size and shooting to them. Maybe even some shot gravity to kind of get some pressure off some other guys.
Hughes can actually, handle, create. Yeah, good player. Good all-around player. Next up is the Grizzlies with their only pick in the draft.
I have Cassius Stanley for the Memphis Grizzlies. Athlete, I think he has some potential as possibly a 3-and-D player, even though I'm not sure his three-pointer is going to be that elite. I appreciate his athleticism. He plays hard, and I think he has the talent to maybe be like a competent role player.
A good value at this pick, and I like his shot. Next up is the Spurs.
I'm going Paul Reed here. I actually have Paul Reed as a first rounder, and I think he shows a lot. He played up very, very good at DePaul, and I think for San Antonio, they're just happy to find him in the second round.
I agree. I also have Paul Reed as a first-round talent. Love his defense. Shot's a little funky, but at a minimum, he'll be a great defender. Next up is the Pelicans.
I want to go with Tyler Bay.
Yeah, that's a good pick for them.
I think he adds something that they haven't already picked up in the draft, and he's a kind of a universal defender. He's just an overall really good defender and can play post and wing.
Yeah, that's a nice fit for them. Next up is Riley with the Kings.
For the Kings, I'm going to go with Vernon Carey. He has great offensive potential and some good defensive potential. I like him backing up Marvin Bagley. He has great size and length, and I think he could be a really great scoring force off that bench.
Well, once again, another top 10 guy like Jaden McDaniels, and you're getting him at pick 42. Next up is the Bulls, and they took Ball with their first pick. I think we're going to go with Isaiah Joe. Keep in mind we lost Levine. So Isaiah Joe is one of the best pure shooters in this draft. Had a little bit of an off year. I think people are forgetting how good he was as a freshman. He was bothered by injuries this year. But definitely Chicago needs some offense, and I think he has great potential as a shooter. Next up, with pick 45, is Orlando.
I'm going to go with Jordan Nwora out of Louisville. Good size, shooter, a little streaky at times, but Orlando just needs to, I think, pile up on shooters.
Yeah. Agreed. They struggled from that department this year, and some of their better shooters are getting a little old in the tooth. Next up is Portland. This is their second pick, at pick 46.
Portland got Josh Green, kind of 3-and-D guy in the first round, second round, going other direction, getting where'd he go? Guy from Gonzaga. His name is totally
Killian Tilly?
Yeah, Killian Tilly. Yeah. His name escaped me. Really good player. Just has been injured his whole career. I think if he didn't get injured, someone else said this, probably wouldn't still be in college at this point. But worth a fly in second round. If he can stay healthy, you're getting a great value in the second round.
Probably the best shooting big man in this draft. I don't think that could be argued too much. Last 2 years, injuries. When he was a sophomore, that was his best season. And I think he's put on a little weight since then, and that's hurt his mobility. I think if he can get in shape and stay healthy, this would be a steal. Next up is Riley with the Celtics' fourth and final pick at 47.
Celtics finishing their marathon of a draft here with Robert Woodard, once again addressing the bench issues. He could be a great backup to Jaylen Brown. I think they're pretty similar players in terms of they can both sink a three and they'll both put you on the highlight reel because they'll dunk on you. So I think that's a pretty good lineup.
Yeah, can shoot, athletic. Yeah, I think he actually could even play for Boston for sure, could play at the 4. Next up at 48 is Golden State.
Maybe a reach based on the consensus, but I'm going Tyshawn Alexander. Really love his shot. Think it's very projectable. Good defender. I think he's going to be great at a second round value.
Yeah. I like Tyshawn. He's been steadily moving up our board. He's made steady progress all 3 years. Can also play some at the point. He played a lot at the point as a freshman. Yeah, as an emergency, he had to. They had injuries, and he had to play at the point. Sixers are up. So far, we have Quickly and help me out, McDaniels. And here it is a no-brainer who I'm taking. I'm so happy he's there. Sixers so badly need a good backup point guard, and I'm going to take Peyton Pritchard. Great offensive player, might not be a great defender at the NBA level, but at worst, he's going to be a solid backup point guard who can shoot. Next up at number 50 is, again, Dustin, his hometown Hawks.
Skylar Mays here. Another good defender, active guy. I think it really helps. He actually complements a little bit of Trae Young and a lot of his deficiencies on defense. Agreed.
He's a big point guard, though he's more of a combo guard. He's not a pure point guard. But I love his headiness, his smarts, his leadership. Good pick at this point in the draft. Next up, the Warriors' third and final pick at 51.
For another guy that I just really think is going to stick in the league and for the Warriors, who really need depth. I think that's huge. I'm going Najee Marshall from Xavier. Just good all-around player. I'm excited to see him for the Warriors.
Yes, yeah. Versatile player. At pick 52, we have Riley with the Kings, and I think this is their fourth and final pick.
A marathon of a draft, and once now you're getting to your fourth pick, you can start taking some swings on some guys. So I'm going to take a swing on Cassius Winston, 3-level scorer, won a whole bunch when he was in college, and I think if things don't work out with De'Aaron Fox, which they should because he's a great player, but if things don't work out, he's another great point guard who can run the floor. He's really smart, and he can bring another level of energy and camaraderie to the Kings.
Proven winner. And Kings need a backup point guard, especially now that you traded Corey Joseph away. I think he's going to be a solid, just like Pete Pritchard, proven guy. Good pick for the Kings there, especially getting Winston that late in the draft. Next up is the OKC Thunder.
I only have 3 picks left, so I'm going with Filip Petrusev, even though he did sign a overseas contract.
Right.
I think
With Mega B-Max.
Yes, I don't think Oklahoma City really needs him right now, but I think let him develop, let him play a lot, and they can bring him over when they like.
Right. Yep. Next up is the Indiana Pacers at 54. This is their lone pick in the draft.
With the Pacers pick in this draft, I'm going to go with Reggie Perry. The Pacers really need some size. They need some rebounding, and Reggie Perry is a big guy who can rebound, so I think it makes sense to plug him right into that front court. He might take a little bit. He's 20 years old, but he might take a little bit to adapt, but I think he could be a really great rotation-based rebounder in the front court.
Next up is the Nets at pick 55.
I'll take Miles Powell from Seton Hall. I think he's a microwave scorer, can light it up. Possibly if he's called up, I can see the Nets put him in the G League, let him just cook the G League competition. If they need a scorer off the bench, plug and play him.
Definitely be a popular pick since he's a local boy and prolific scorer. Next up is Lee's Hornets. Pick somebody who's already retired. Lee deserves this for leaving us. We're gonna give him Willis Reed.
That actually might be an improvement for Charlotte Russell. I'm going with CJ Ellaby. I really like his game. I think he played on a not so great Washington State team. But
They
he
were
can light it up. Yeah, they were very bad. But he can light it up. He's very active on defense. I don't think he really got a lot of credit for what he really did and what he brought. Played out of position, so I like him.
Yeah, good rebounding wing. All around score. He's got nice moves. You'd like to see him be a little more efficient, but he didn't really have a lot of talent around him. So it's one of those things like with Anthony Edwards, he had to take a lot upon himself. Next up is the Clippers.
They're a winning team. They don't really have too many holes unless a player suddenly leaves. So why not just take Mason Jones? I like his free throw rate that he had at Arkansas. I think he has a solid jump shot. Possibly could contribute. Probably take a couple of years.
Sixers are going to be super happy as long as I can pronounce his name correctly. I really think this player is underrated, and that's Abdoulaye Ndouye. I think I got it right. And he's somebody who played for Calais for 4 years, I believe. He's 22, so he's about the same age as a college senior, and tremendous wingspan, +8. Great catch and shoot shooter. As I said, he played point guard a lot for them. I don't think he's dynamic enough to do that at the NBA level, but I think he's going to be a great wing with some playmaking ability. He also is pretty good with runners. He's actually pretty creative that way and can make them with both hands. I think he's a very underrated player. He's a good role player. Good role player. Next up is Toronto.
I think I'm going to go with Azubuike. I really trust that Raptors coaching staff to get the most out of his interior presence because it is just dominant really on both ends. I think if Hassan Whiteside can make it in the league, I have no doubt Azubuike can make it even this late in the draft. Free throw shooting is a little bit of an issue, but if he can just get to like 60% or something like that, I think it's definitely worth just the rim protection, and then can finish anything inside.
Yeah, he's the all-time NCAA leader in field goal percentage. Tremendous, body and strong. Problem is mobility. He's not the shot blocker that Whiteside was at the college level. Whiteside was out off the charts in shot blocks, but still, I mean, he definitely has rim protection ability, and Toronto could both. Help me out here. Gasol and Ibaka are free agents, right? Yeah. So, that's definitely a smart pick for the Raptors. All right, and we're going to wrap this up with the Pelicans, and this will be their fourth pick.
And I think it's only fitting that I do the last pick because I've done all the second and first round, I think.
Dustin, I always wondered why they called you second round Dustin, and now I know.
That's my specialty. Finishing out on a bang, I guess. I think he could actually get drafted in the second or the first round. I'm going Jay Scrubb here. He's very, very talented. Obviously, he hasn't taken the normal path to, whether it be college or even the NBA for this case, but I think he actually is a really good player.
Yeah, I mean, he caught people's eye with Team USA. Yeah, he's definitely got some of the measurables. His numbers, he's D2 level, right? Yeah, D2. Weren't as good as you'd like him to see, but definitely, he definitely impressed with Team USA and proved that he belonged.
This is the best available players that did not make our draft board in our mock draft. Marcus Howard, Ashton Hagans, and Nick Richards was the top 3 best available based off the collective rankings. And like you guys were discussing, not a lot of international players who probably could be expected to pick in the second round didn't make the cut for our mock draft.
This was definitely a lot of fun. I enjoyed it.
All right.
Yeah, me too.
I appreciate it all.